just going to start recording. And so I'm here with Eric Olcsvary.
Nice.
Got it?
Well
Cool.
done, yeah.
Who is a comic book artist, creator here in Southern Ontario.
Mhm.
And thank you for being here today. And
Thank you.
we're just going to be talking. That's
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So you're going to see me looking off to the side because I got all my questions over here. I guess I could have put them over here and made life easy. I'll learn. We're learning. One of the things I always enjoy sort of starting things off with are this or that.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do the controversial one right off the
Boy.
bat. Marvel or DC?
DC.
Really?
Instantly. Yep.
Oh no, we're not going to be friends.
Oh no. Hey, I can respect it. Marvel's got great stuff, but DC's been there since the beginning for me.
This is true. This is true. Though Marvel Comics #1 was 1939 as well. So DC beats him by a year, but okay. Digital pages or traditional pen and paper?
Pen and paper.
Okay.
I originally worked digitally before I went into comics, and I'm sure we'll get into it later. I was going to go to school for graphic design. It was the main thing I did my whole life. I loved illustrating and painting, but graphic design was my main thing. So when I ended up pivoting to comic book work, it never occurred to me to even draw it traditionally. I was just like, actually, I was like, vectors. Let's draw them with vectors. So I was drawing my comics with vectors for my first 3.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you know what? That's not uncommon either. It's
Really?
very odd. But anyways, yeah. So I originally did digital, and then I was working on my 4th book, and I did the first panel, and I went, I hate this so much. And I thought, do I hate the medium, like doing this digitally, or am I done in comics? I was having a life crisis. Like I'm done in comics, and then no, that's when I picked up traditional, which was actually the start of this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're just getting into it. Why the switch? What prompted that switch to, like, is it feeling? Is it, like,
There's a lot of things. I mean, everyone, and I'll say this a lot too, everyone's journey in comic book creation, arts in general, but in comics especially, is so different. People try to find that specific how do I break in thing, and it is different for every creator, no matter who they are. And the way I started was very bland, I suppose. I had no help. I was in school. I was in my final year, and my painting. I was in painting, and that was my final project. Was a painting project, and my teacher was like, "Do you really want to be painting?" And I'm like, "I love painting." And he's like, "Is that what you want, though?" And I'm like,
no.
"How can you, man? Like, how can you tell?" And he was like, "What do you want?" And I said, "I love telling stories, comic books." So that's when I jumped in because I knew digital worked more. But as you're learning the industry and meeting people, and even at the time I read comics, but now it's my job. So I was reading comics, right? You get that feel of the paper, and you're looking at your heroes, and you're like, they draw superheroes and heroes, your idols, and they're drawing with paper, and you're seeing people with dip pen and brushes and fine liner pens, and you're just like, I want to try that, right? Like, I just want to try it. And I mean, for me, it's the feel. It's I can feel it. I use a brush. I don't use pens very often, so I dip brush in inkwell. I know exactly what pressure I need. I can try out different paper and see how that works. It feels more real, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, it does completely.
I mean, there's lots of other reasons, but I mean, the feel is the big one.
Okay.
Honestly.
And you got into it, so we're going to go into it. So if we're talking about getting into the industry, and we're going to keep coming back to this, I think, because so many people, for my entire life, people have wanted to get into the industry, and I think, particularly since the advent of the Silver Age, people have wanted to be comic book artists. The question becomes, how do I get into it? What do I do? And you hit on a really interesting point of reading comics.
Yeah.
But were you reading them to read them, or were you reading them for research? Were you studying them?
I do study it now.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
like obviously when we're like, we have our comics that we read for fun. But now when you were talking about, I was reading comics. What were you? Yeah.
Well, so, and I'll start with saying my main inspiration was the Bone series by Jeff Smith. It's just perfect. It's perfect in every way, shape, and form. I love it. It's what got me. That's how I learned to read. Honestly, was Bone, growing up, and that's what I read. My uncle and my dad gave me their collection of think it was 80s to 90s Batman, the whole Jason Todd stuff and all that jazz.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what I grew up on, was that Batman.
Okay.
And I read it for fun. Freaking love Batman. That's all I did, was everything Batman, right? And Spider-Man, of course. But then when I got into working in comics, there's a really cool change. When you love something so much, you're reading for fun, but you're starting to nitpick and you're noticing little things, like very little things. And then you get names, right? Oh, that book was written by so and so, so it's probably going to be awesome, or it's going to have this type of style,
Mm-hmm.
or this artist, and vice versa. So it switched to research maybe my second year in. I was reading a lot of indie comics, which is awesome, from around here. Meeting people in indie. I didn't read much popular comics at all starting.
Okay.
It was a lot of indie, and then Bone. But yeah, now it's
well,
like,
Bone was indie at the time too.
Yeah, well, exactly, right?
Yeah.
But now it's like I go to a comic shop and I'm looking for fun, but I'm noticing little things that someone else might not, who isn't in the industry, or at least reading a lot, or as an artist, I'm looking and going, why'd they do that? Or ooh, they did that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And can you? Oh, I might get myself in trouble with this, but can you tell, particularly with it? I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a little bit different with indie artists, because they really can't do this. But when you see some of the bigger name artists, I can tell. So maybe I'm just off base when they're phoning it in.
Mm-hmm.
And can you, like, when you're looking at that, do you notice that? Does it affect your judgment of it?
Help me define phoning in for this, just so I'm properly answering this.
So,
I think I had someone ask me this last week. I just want to make sure, honestly, but I want to make sure.
Well, it's so again, my age is going to come out here,
Okay.
but you look at like Ron Lim stuff on the Silver Surfer, and pre-Infinity Gauntlet, dude is just like, he's pouring his heart and soul into it. Post Infinity Gauntlet, he starts getting put on more and more work. They're expecting more and more out of him, and you can tell some of his work on the filler issues of Infinity Crusade, some of the filler issues of Surfer. It doesn't have as much detail. It doesn't have as much. It's still getting the story done, but he's phoning it in.
There's a weird. Sometimes you can't even say why. Like, and I don't. Well, I'll name names. I don't care. I was on a podcast just last week, and I was asked the same question, because we were talking about the recent Batman and Detective Comics run, which I love. I just love Batman, period. And I really do enjoy the new Detective Comics. They're nothing crazy, but they're good. And then the new Batman, obviously, that they just rebooted, which is awesome. But just
the new Batman, or are we talking Absolute?
I'm talking Batman. They they started at 1 again in November, with Jimenez on art and all that jazz. So it's great. I love it. Before they did that, they did Hush 2. And
you're going after Jim Lee.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason I am is because I just talked about it last week, because it's great. Have you looked at it?
I've seen it. Yeah,
it's good. Like, I look at it, and I'm like, it's good. But there's something about it, and you're like, what changed, or what's happened here? Where you're just kind of like, I don't know. Depending on the series, depending where the world's at, I find comics right now, even in the popular sense, is getting a lot more love, like from the artists pouring into it. Like, honestly, in the last year or two, I've seen a lot more love in the art. With the Absolute books, they've been just killing it with the love being put into that work. I always talk up Absolute Wonder Woman, because the panel work, even just the panels, is like, what are you doing? It's so cool. So I don't know. That's a big question, because there's so many different things going on in comics right now.
No, but you're hitting on it, and you're sort of just starting your journey. Jim Lee's been doing it since the mid '80s, even before that. A little early '70s.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I'm sorry, late '70s.
Yeah.
Early '80s. And I kind of wonder if he's, getting old. Like, it happens to the best of us.
Old and busy, honestly. And I mean, that's the thing. That's just how it is. I think any artist and writer is going to get that. But there is something to be said about, when you're in this specific industry, you got to be putting love in, or why are you even here, honestly?
Yeah, and it's weird, because you look at his Instagram, and I think following sort of any of your favorite artists on Instagram is a great way to see what they want to showcase as opposed to what the industry wants to showcase. Using you and your Instagram, you put up what you like on there. And it's a great way to sort of see who you are. You look at Jim Lee because you brought him up. Some of the stuff that he's shown on there is phenomenal. And then you talk about Hush too, and it's like, huh?
It's just something off kilter. It's weird.
Yeah,
it's weird.
So, so where to transition from there? I think we'll just keep going for.
I can give another example
No,
too.
please.
A big one of my idols is Scotty Young. So I've always like, it's funny too, because only just about a year and a half ago did I really start looking at his stuff. Because I'd seen it and I'd go to a comic shop and I'm like, I hate Fairyland. That just sounds dumb, right? But I love super chunky ink work and fun cartoons that are not for kids. I make kids books, but all ages books. But I like when they're just off, right? So I picked it up for the first time and I was like, whoa, because art is just gorgeous and the story's fun. And recently, and I watch a lot of his videos, him and Todd McFarlane have the best videos ever to just inspire you. He posts a lot of one-off artworks. He does cover every now and then, especially on Fairyland, of course. But he mostly just writes. And I was watching one of his videos, and he was saying, like, in recent years, with how busy he's getting and getting older, he didn't, what I would guess is what Jim Lee would be doing. He didn't just say, I'm going to make it to make it. Like, he just went, you know what? I want to write. I'm too busy. I'll just write. And when I want to draw, it's going to be quality and very good. And he loves it because he took the time to draw it. So I think he's a good example of someone who's sort of avoided that problem because his work is still killer.
Yeah, it's a hard it's sort of the position you want to be in is where you can pick and choose what you want to do. And I think in the case of Jim Lee, there's a lot of expectations on him as to, I need you to be doing, like, you need to be doing this. And I think you're 100% right. He'd much rather be doing covers and running the business and making and bringing DC up. Like,
I was gonna say too, I was on a podcast before that last one as well, and I had the pleasure of being on with Ross Ritchie, who had originally owned Boom. Fantastic guy, oh my gosh, and he has so much to say, especially on the business side of comics. That was really interesting to listen to in regards to what we're speaking about, because he said, have you noticed how many Batman runs there are right now, presently? He's like, there's like 15 different Batman stories. You got Batman and Robin. You got, I was just reading the, what is it called? Patterns. Something Patterns. Okay. That's going to kill me. It's a very, very cool. But anyway.
It'll come to you in about 10 minutes.
Yes, it will. But anyways, I mean, there's like 15 different Batman stories going on at once, not to mention, detective, regular Batman, and then absolute. But he's like, when companies are looking at, because he went on about numbers. He didn't touch anything about artists or writers. He was like, they have a target to hit. They want to make this amount of profit. You got this many books. What's going to work? Make another Batman, right? Yep. So even just Hush 2, whether it's a good idea or not.
Well, it was, I just did a post yesterday, this morning. I don't know anymore. Particularly about the fact that the quality of Marvel is not going to be improving in the next little while. And it's specifically for that reason. They want to hit those numbers. They don't care. Well, I mean, the editor-in-chief of Spider-Man came out and said, we're just not going to listen to you, and we don't care, which is one of the dumbest things
earlier.
No, the worst bit is for Marvel zombie like myself to sit there and go, no, DC's figured it out this time. But we saw it in the 90s as well. This is the joy of being old. You saw the same thing, and it's weird as a historian. Historians hate the phrase history repeats itself.
Okay.
But you will hear us say stuff like it does rhyme.
Interesting. I like that.
So cool. the idea is that history repeating itself has this sort of inevitability to it, that it has to happen this way. Whereas if you say it rhymes, things follow a pattern. So if something happens, then it's probably going to go this way. So you look at the 90s, Marvel had hit it big, had done some things, then made a whole bunch of really, really dumb decisions. And they started to go downhill. So what did they start doing? They started, well, particularly when the Image guys left, then you start seeing, okay, I'm going to get myself in trouble. And this is the problem with being a historian. I have to caveat everything.
Yep.
You get the gimmick covers. X-Men #1 with Jim Lee, and Spider-Man #1 with Todd McFarlane. Yes, I know X-Force #1 was there too. Nobody cares. Because those were the two biggest selling books of all time.
Yep.
And we're never going to hit those numbers again. X-Men #1, each one, like it was 5+ million copies. I know Liefeld's going to go, yeah, there was 7 million. There were other reasons for that. It doesn't actually, like, X-Men #1 is still the largest selling comic. And then those guys left, and Marvel's like, more gimmick covers, more gimmick covers. And their writing went downhill. At the same time, this is where DC starts hitting its stride with the death of Superman, the breaking of the Batman, JLA, JLI, JLE, doing just absolutely fantastic stuff. And they're starting to go like this for, like, as much as you might hate it, Marvel's always been on top.
Of course. Yeah.
And DC
That's
has,
how it is. Yeah.
DC kind of goes like this.
Yep.
But they started going like this, and then you start to see the crossovers happen. You have the Marvel versus DC and the Amalgam Universe here, and then Marvel almost goes bankrupt, and that's why they sold their rights to Universal, Fox, and Sony. At the same time, you see right now, Marvel's not doing so good. They made some really bad decisions. They're doing gimmick covers of, like what? One, I was reading, one of the Marvel ones had like 180 variant covers for the run of 6 issues.
I believe that.
And they're constantly rebooting to #1s, because those sell better. As the gentleman was saying, Ross
Ritchie, yeah.
Ross Ritchie. I'm horrible with names.
So am I.
And now they're doing crossovers. We have Deadpool and Batman, and I'm very curious to see how this ends out, because Marvel's never going to go bankrupt again. They got Disney money behind them.
Oh yeah, of course.
And who knows what's going on with DC.
All I know, like, just from, and obviously you're going to know a lot more about this history than I do, but just as a consumer and also someone who gets to speak with some of these industry professionals, there's a lot of that consensus right now of like, oh, I love Marvel, but DC's doing this and Marvel's doing that. And it's always going to flip-flop. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you please.
I was just going to divert the conversation a little bit, because from a creator's perspective, I just hit the audience, I'm sorry. from a creating perspective, especially people who want to work in comics, they're not seeing that specific side of like, oh, who's better, who's worse, and how's that affecting me. But they always ask the question of, aren't comics dying? And that is an interesting question that I forget who I was speaking with on another podcast. I go on a lot of shows. It's fun, and I love teaching people stuff. I forgot who I was speaking with, but I believe they've been in the industry a while, or at least I'll paraphrase their quote. But they had said, people say comics are dying, but only every 5 years or so, maybe a little less, which I also think is very important to the conversation we're having, is, are comics dying? And I remember when I started 4.5 years ago, everyone asked me that, are comics still around? And I'm like, what do you mean, are comics still around? And people are like, aren't comics dying? Like, are they really even a thing? And I would argue that at that time, when I was at least checking out comics, I wasn't really interested. I was kind of disinterested in what was happening, at least personally. And then in the last, like I said earlier, year or two, I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And obviously I'm looking at DC more, but I'm like, wow, like, we're getting different stories, fun, interesting things. And I've noticed even art in the big guys like Marvel and DC, they're switching to traditional work a lot more. I didn't really enjoy when I was reading comics. Everything was all very blatantly digitally drawn, and I found it to look really ugly. But anyways, it's interesting. When people say, are comics dying, I'm like, give it a couple years and it'll jump right back up. And numbers have been great even too. But go ahead.
Well, no, and I think that particularly, like, now more so than for a lot of us, when we talk about getting into the comic industry and stuff like that, we're idolizing the Silver and Bronze Age, and that reality just isn't anymore. And I don't think we're ever going to go back to it. And I think that now more than ever, what we call indie work is incredibly important, but that there has to be an understanding that indie comics survive, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but indie comics survive if the big guys are doing good.
Of course. They're the face of the industry, right? That's just how it is.
but at the same time, I was just explaining to a professor talking about the Dark Edgy Boys of the '90s, and
Yeah.
he was like, "I don't know this term." I'm like, "All right, give me a second." Talking about how with image splitting off and the creation of Diamond Distributor, um, independent companies like Chaos or Chaosium, whatever they're called, Sirius, um, Eastman's Kitchen Sink Press, could now distribute in ways that they never could, and that saw indie comics rise to a level that they never had. And I remember, you know, in the '80s, only being able to access essentially the big three, and Dark Horse sort of showed up every once in a while. But then you had, just a plethora of comics, and you walk into a local comic book store like Heroes here in London. There's just a wall of new stuff that changes every week, and there's a whole section just for indie comics, which never had happened, and they're sometimes selling better than the big guys, which is you know for people starting up, but even people, I know people who have just done their entire careers in essentially the indies, and they've never wanted to go work for the big guys, and this is a good thing. And you brought up, are comic books dying? And I think people have been asking that. Like,
Oh yeah.
there's you go back and look at Stan's soapbox from the '70s, and people are like, "Are comic books dying?" And he's like, "No." And I think that we can still say the same thing. I think there are a lot of people who want it to die for sort of vindication, which is this weird position. It's like, why do you want to rob people of joy?
It is such a unique industry. It is so unique, and even when I was talking with someone else a while ago, and they said, "Is this your full-time job or whatever?" And I said, "Yeah, full-time in the comic industry." And they said, "Can you define comic industry for me?"
Oh, there's a great one. Can you define comic industry for me?
Yeah, I can't, because I'd have to split it into so many different things, but I can give the quick basics. The industry is your local shop. It's your big three: Image, DC, and Marvel. I totally didn't just put Marvel at the end purposefully. Anyway, local comic shops, your big publishers, your indie publishers, your writers, your editors, cover artists. I know people that only do covers, interior artists, and then you can split it up even more, which when I explain this to people who are just buying my books, they're like, "What the heck is an inker?" You got penciler, inker, colorist, letterer. Letterer even blows their mind. And that is not an easy job either. But I mean, that's just distilling it down to what I work in. There's a lot more to it. So I find when people ask that, I usually just give, I'm a creator, a writer, or an artist. But the comic industry, especially now, which ties to what we were talking about earlier, is so big that when someone says, "How do you break into comics?" because it's so hard and so gate kept, I'm like, it is that, and it is totally not that at all, because it's so big and so accessible. And indie comics are so normal now that you don't have to go through underground publishers that aren't really known. You can be your own publisher, really, as long as you've got a logo and you're distributing, and that's all she wrote. I mean, obviously, if you're going to keep it real indie, but it's accessible. And if it's something you want to do for a living, you can just do it, which is huge, and it's so cool.
So let's hit on that now before we go into any other stuff. How did you get into the comic book industry, and do you think yours is a copyable path, or do you have, or how could let's start with, how did you get into the industry?
Okay. It is not a "you're hired, walk through the door" thing, which I need to say ASAP, because people seem to think it is. And I know people that are arguably more in the industry than I am, and they're like, "How do I get in the industry?" Or, "Why haven't I broken in yet?" And I'm like, "Dude, you're in. Like, you just need to tell yourself you're in." And that's just art anyways. But the way I got in, is it weird?
Can you just turn it towards yourself a little bit?
Yes. I was actually going to say, can I take this off and then just
absolutely
switch it?
So we're going to pause for 2 seconds. And absolutely nothing happened. So how did you get in the industry?
Okay, so like I said, slow burn. I am in the industry now, not as people would romanticize being in the industry of what it is. It's not an easy job. Some people don't even have it as their full-time gig. I'm very lucky to say I do. But it's not easy. So the way I got in, this is the main thing I tell people to do, is to talk. And I hate people get upset when I say this. You have to network. It's a lot of networking. And not even networking as in businessy, shake your hand, how can you get me a job? It's making friends. Making friends, learning who these people are and what their journey has been and what their role is in the industry. The friends you make are going to be the ones that get you further. So a great example is I made my first 3 books and I'm like, wow, this is great. I don't know much else about the industry. I start making friends. I start talking to people. Well, how did you get this label on there? Or how is your book in Quebec and mine's not? Or vice versa, right? And then you start to learn that person's name's on this person's book, and that person's on this person's book, and that person and this person, and everyone's just, it's a big community working together. And I had just, a couple months ago, I did my first Kickstarter to reprint a book I worked on, and I had 2 of my friends, Peyton Atkinson and Jeff McClinchy, work on covers. And that is a big part of this industry. To say you're in is to be collaborating with people. Take a break from, oh man, I don't even have to write anymore. I get some other guy to do it for me. My friend Scott Wojcik, all he does is write. But now I get to focus on drawing, and then I can work on his books, on someone else's books, and write for this person. It's a lot of collaboration. I know it's a messy answer, but honestly, that's to distill it down. It is making comics and sharing it with people. Honestly, that's what it is.
So, sort of 2 parts to follow off of that. The first one I'm going to be is, because networking is so important. How I met you guys is through conventions and stuff like that, and it's a great way to network. But how it's very easy to tell when somebody wants to network with you. Yes. They want to use you. And I'm not saying that a lot of people do that. Quite the opposite. But the big paranoia that we all have is that it's going to come across that way. So do you have suggestions for how anybody who's been on the UWO subreddit or any university subreddit, how do I make friends? Is literally the question I'm about to ask.
And I was going to say, it is, and that's why I said it earlier, it's making friends. First thing I'll say, Jim Zub, go to Jim Zub's website. He has an answer to every single comic book question you have, and I seriously mean it, and he's done it in full detail. It's amazing. And not that I'm brushing the question off, but he's just got amazing answers. Because that's where I got the great answer that I'm about to say, is that it is making friends, period. When you go in, and even if you're not trying to be that guy of like, what job can you get me? You're going to come off as that if you go up and you're like, I am networking. Hello, shake the hand, and they're like, hi. And then when you say the dreaded words, how do I break into that? They're out. They've already checked out. They don't want to hear, how do I break into the industry? Because they hear it all the time. You can ask me all you want. But a lot of the big guys don't want to hear it because it's said all the time. And like I said earlier, everyone's journey is very different. So you have to go in excited. You're making comics. You should love comics. So there shouldn't be any worry about getting rich and famous. You're not going to. And if you do, awesome. But if you don't, you're doing it because you love comics. And now you're not networking. You're making a friend with someone else who also loves comics. Talk about comics. Talk about movies. Talk about games. You're going to make a close friend. And then that friend, a good example is I'm working with a writer named Larry. He works at Lunar, actually. We became friends just to be friends. Like, great, you work at Lunar. I don't know what you're going to really do for me, and I don't really care. You're a good guy. And we just made a comic. Like, just out of nowhere, he said, hey, Eric, I need an artist. Boom, there's your, I can't talk about the comic, but not yet. But that's a big part of it, is when you make friends, even if it's 10 years down the line, that friend who is important to you because they're a friend could very well be that connection you wanted, right? That's just how it is. So I can't really tell you how to make friends.
No, that's what it comes down to. It. And unfortunately, we're all nerds and geeks, and making friends becomes awkward initially. But something I can say, just from the experiences that I've had recently getting back into the industry, the second you put aside, as you said, the how do I break into the industry, and it's just like, hey, you're a comic book person. How do I talk to you? Like, I want to talk to you about comic books. I want to talk to you about your work. But I want to talk to you, as we've just been doing. It's like, let's talk about DC. Let's talk about Image. What are your takes on this?
You guys are nerds. Nerd out.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you can't even figure out how to nerd out, there's one trick I can tell you for making friends. People usually love to talk about themselves. And if you have no clue what to say, ask them about their book. How did you start this? How long have you been doing it? Why did you do it? Did you just write it? How did you meet the artist? You've just opened up everything you need.
Yeah. And no, and
Yeah.
and that's and I think that's going to be most important, and hopefully something that I'm going to carry through all this is it's less about the 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 business connections. And unfortunately, here at Western and other places, there's a lot of finance bros
Mm-hmm.
who just want to make those connections, and
That's
there's
funny.
less personal connections.
Yeah.
Whereas it's in the comic book industry, it's the personal connections. I was
Mm-hmm.
just watching a really great interview with Chris Claremont and Stan Lee
Mm-hmm.
from, it looked to be about the mid to late 80s.
Okay.
And he was talking about how he got a job in the late 60s at Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And it was literally he just showed up and started talking to people and was willing to do whatever, he started off as the gopher in the Marvel bullpen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he made friends with all the people around there, including Stan. They were like, "Hey, one of our artists is not one of our writers is sick. Do you want to fill in?"
That's exactly it. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
And anything can happen. You don't need to be sitting there praying that someone can't do something, right? But when you've made friends and then that friend goes, "Oh wow, like I love your work." It's in the back of their head
Mm-hmm.
and something can grow from that, which is awesome.
So there comes the other question. This might be a little bit more technical, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
see how it goes and see how much you can answer. But it comes to the sort of financing side of this
Mm-hmm.
because it's really great to sit there and say, "Hey, I can do some writing, or I can do story work. You can do the art, but this doesn't grow on trees."
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're starting to get into it, I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if you're coming into I want to come into this, be prepared to do favors.
Yes.
I
That's a
mean,
weird one to answer because a lot of people will say don't do favors because you need to respect your work.
mm-hmm,
But when you're very new, you've made friends and they're going to say, "Hey, can you do this cover? Or can you do this art?" Right? And if you are financially stable to do it and you're just loving making works, like artwork, and this is a good friend of yours, you're going to want to do the favor. A good example is my Monster of the Abyss series I've done with Scott
mm-hmm,
Wojcik.
mm-hmm,
So comics can be expensive to make, and it takes time, like a long time to make books, depending on how long it is and vice versa. And we came to the agreement, hey, like, Eric, can you do the interiors? And then we split the print run and sell it that way, kind of thing.
mm-hmm,
Depending on your financial situation, you're paying your artists. Usually, I know a lot of people find artists on Fiverr and they get close, but you're just paying them to make the work.
mm-hmm.
When you get close in your industry, it is some favors, but it hits a point where when you've made enough and you're learning your worth, you start to charge.
Mm.
It's if that answered your
It
question.
does,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
I guess to carry on as that,
Mm-hmm.
and it is going to be different for everybody, and
Mm-hmm. Of
please
course.
please understand that everything that we say is with a caveat of you have to find your own way, and at
Yes.
what point it feels
This
comfortable
is
to
what
you.
I'm saying is completely my path and what I've learned from other people's paths. It is different for everybody.
But how long did it take for you to, or get to the point where you're like, okay, now I need to charge you? Like say with Scott, you're working with him. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, like you were comfortable enough with him and with that relationship to say, hey, I'm okay with us splitting this,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially because you did the initial work for free at that point, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got the profit therein, and you're essentially profit sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that relatively common early on?
Especially when you're co-creating.
Mm-hmm.
Like it hit a point where he came to me with this story, and as an artist, I say this a lot, as an artist who is like just loves comics and loves storytelling, I'm not even thinking about the money. I'm thinking about the story. Like how can we make this whatever? And he came to me with 8 pages. No, 6 pages? And I storyboarded him. Like, okay, I got 16 pages. And he's like, what? So and it hits a point where like I created these whatever characters. We've created characters, but I designed them and then I did this big storyboard and he's like, whoa, we got like a comic here. Because it was originally just a short story.
Mm-hmm.
That hits a point where you've abandoned the financial aspect and you're just making an artwork, a piece of art that people can enjoy. And then we thought, shake hands, this is our project.
Mm-hmm.
But it does hit a point with a few projects of writer Dan Wilkins. We hit a point. I love the story, but I'm like, it's your story, and I am your artist, and that's where that different thing hit. What changed for me was I got into the industry, and by that I mean it hit a point where I was like, wow, this is my job. all I'm doing all day is making comics, and people are asking me, can you draw it? Can you teach me? Can you do this cover? Blah, 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 blah. It enveloped my life so much that I'm like, this is my official career. Now I need to make money. And whether it's a friend or someone I know, or if it's someone else that had just met me, vice versa, that's when I learned, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to be doing it this much, now I need to do it, right? But there are creators, even that are huge in the industry, that don't, depending what it is. There may be payments, there may be probably discounts, or they're co-creating it, right? There's a lot of smaller, like big artists who are doing creator-owned works that do that co-creation, right? So it is pretty common even in the big leagues.
Okay. And I think that that's important. I think you hit on one of the biggest things is you will know, though. I think imposter syndrome is going to. Okay, sorry.
Am I good? I'm still
No,
good.
no, no. Everything's
Okay,
good. I just want to make sure.
Yep.
There comes a point where you know you've got to start being truly professional,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I'll ask. One, imposter syndrome is going to kick in,
Mm-hmm.
and I hate imposter syndrome, but it is a reality for everybody. But then it becomes how much do you second guess yourself that you are now a professional? Do you feel that way right
I
now?
don't personally, but I have worked really hard, on a personal level to be able to say like this has been my dream my whole life. Now I'm living that dream, and I either need to accept I'm living that dream or it just ain't gonna work. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how it works for me. It's not the same for everybody. But
No, but I think you're hitting on it. That you've got to hit that point.
mm-hmm.
I talk with kids in university. It's at some point you have to decide whether you're going to be an academic or not, and
Mm-hmm.
that is a huge mental switch.
Yes.
So
And
you went through it.
I mean, there are days, of course, that anyone's gonna take where like I'll have a slow day or a rainy day, and I'm like, man, like it kind of hits you, right? That's just how
Mm-hmm.
it is. But um, I paraphrase a lot of quotes. I'm sorry, but someone once told me that true artists, don't just make art because they want to. They make art because they have to, and
Mm-hmm.
it's because they have to. Like, not that anyone's forcing them, but there's this urge, this soul urge to make your work. And if you're feeling that, you're a professional. Even if you've only sold 3 books, you're a professional. And then, like you said earlier, you just need to treat it professionally. You need to treat it as in like you are doing this full time. This is your job. This is what you want. This is what you're going to get. That's that mental switch. Obviously, in quantity, it's going to show. I've released 5 books this year. I've hand drawn 5 of them. One of them hasn't released yet. Sorry. I've hand drawn like 7 books this year, but the other 5 are all just released this year. It hits a point where you're hitting those numbers, and you have fans that you're selling to, and and then you're like, whoa, I ran out of books. Like, okay, I guess I'm professional. So you'll see that in numbers, but it's certainly a mental game too.
And how do you deal with the mental game?
Narrow it down for me, honestly.
Um, well, so as you talked about, there are going to be rainy days. There's
Yeah.
going to be rain. There's going to be days where you're like, I don't want to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and the question becomes, how do you deal with it? Like we talked about networking. Networking is exhausting,
Mm-hmm.
and even if you're just sitting there with your friends, you have to be on, and
Yeah.
we're all nerds, and we all have that social battery
Yeah.
of, yeah, we're done. Nope, we're done for the.
Yeah.
So, but then you still have to go home and do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And how have you dealt with that sort of aspect of it, the mental game?
I will say, as I guess a tip or my opinion, I suppose, you need to find your natural rhythm. When I quit my full time job and I was like, I'm in comics now, I stuck with shift work. I was like, okay, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's it, because that's what I was used to. I learned, maybe in a month, I'm like, I really hate this. I thought, didn't I quit shift work to stop doing shift work? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's for me personally. I know a lot of people that do shift work in this industry, and that's just not my thing. Um, Another artist that I know who has a similar routine to me, where you wake up, you have your nice morning routine. I do a meditation and vice versa. Have a really nice breakfast, go for a walk, whatever, exercise. treat your body well. You need to really need your health is very important in this industry too. I've learned the wonders of chiropractics this year. Honestly,
Okay.
hunched over a desk
Oh,
drawing, right?
true. Yeah.
That's a big one. Take care of your body. That should be the first thing in the morning is giving yourself the sunlight, the proper food, and exercise. And then I'm like, I'm groggy. I don't want to draw, right? I love comics, but man, I don't want to draw. So that morning is coffee and emails, scheduling, networking,
Hmm.
looking for work. I mean, like I make comics for myself and for others, but there's a lot of comic artists, me included, who don't just do comics. I just was hired for an album cover, releasing at the end of the month, which is awesome.
Cool.
Um, so that's one thing. You know, I do portraits as well. I do little comic strips. So I get hired for comic strips that people just want personally,
Hmm.
vice versa. Freelance. It's freelancing.
Yep.
Especially as indie as I am. I'm not working for DC or anything, so I don't need to just pluck jobs out of nowhere. That's it. That's my morning, and then about afternoon, evening, have a nice lunch, and then I'm drawing. So, but that's what works for me. I would definitely say you need to learn your limits. I've gone 12-hour days straight of drawing, which I love, but it hurts. It will hurt. And then the next morning, you're like, why did I do that? Right? You need to remember, take the time to read a comic. You love reading comics. Play a game, watch a show, go hang out with a friend. I usually try and go out for a beer or coffee with a friend a couple times a week.
Mhm.
You're making your own hours now. So enjoy that privilege, right? But obviously, you don't want to be lethargic.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Well, I think that becomes the working from home essentially.
Mm-hmm.
When I assume you have a home studio.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Most people
It's
do
messy,
now.
but
Like
it's a home
I think
studio.
the days of the Marvel bullpen
Mm-hmm.
are over.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in some ways. But you have to find your own routine, but you also have to recognize that it is a job and get your butt in gear in sometimes. And can you maybe talk about how you, because you can't really force creativity,
No.
but you do have to work.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you balance that?
First thing I will say is there is an anthology called This Is Serious. Have you heard of This Is Serious?
I have actually.
Canadian,
Yeah.
from Hamilton.
Yeah.
The Hamilton Gallery, actually, curated by Joe Ullman.
Mm-hmm.
So he made this book, and he has a giant intro to it. And the first thing he says is, yes, I have a second job. I work at a bookstore. And he said, that doesn't mean I'm not a professional comic creator. He's like, it's still a full-time job, but I have another job. And that is allowed. And I find a lot of people, even in the industry or outside of the industry, think that that means you are not in. Well, if you have a second job, you're not in the industry. There are huge comic creators who, you can work at a Shoppers Drug Mart if you want. It doesn't matter. That's where I worked. So it depends on your lifestyle. So if you can't force that creativity, and you shouldn't, but if you're not feeling it and it takes you a whole year to make one book, and I know a lot of creators that do that, one book a year, I could never. They have that second job, and that's totally okay. That's their lifestyle. For me personally, there's that love of chasing a new story. When I finish a book, I'm already on 3 more. Like it's crazy. I usually have about 4 books at once that I'm juggling. I just
Cool.
think it's a blast. And there's other things in there. There's comic strips, like I said. There's other freelance work, or even just prepping. Scott Wojcik and I are working on a story that's going to take us probably 2 years to write. You're always creatively doing something. So I would say, like, you don't need to force it, but when you have that routine and you're happy with what you're doing, you're going to naturally be creative. And you're going to have your specific inspirations. My main inspiration is music. If something's wrong with me, I'm going to tailor an album for my day to listen to, and I'm feeling it. And I'm like, yup. And even if it's just thumbnail sketches, you did something, and that's awesome. Celebrate it.
Okay. So just for any sort of thing, whatever industry you're in, those little victories, the you did something good today. I got something accomplished. And for me, half the time it's I got a paragraph written on a paper. It's like I did something today. I can quantify this as a success.
Congratulations, by the way.
But then that's a really important one to hit on. I think
you need to celebrate the wins, no matter how small they are. I just finished a pitch. I've been self-published for my whole career, and I'm now looking. I'm like, I kind of want to expand to something. Canadian. I want to stick Canadian, maybe smaller in publishing to work with.
Mhm.
And, I didn't do too much work yesterday. I worked my butt off the day before. So I'm like, okay, I can just write a pitch today,
Mhm.
and I did. And you just have to celebrate that sometimes. Some days are going to be 100%, you're doing great. Other days, you're just slow. That's how it is.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Thank you for opening that door.
Of course.
So when we're looking at the comic book industry,
Mhm.
as you said, there's layers to this onion.
Mhm.
You have sort of like the first layer, which is like the truly independent, self-published. You've got to find your collaborators, or you can be the writer. You can do it all yourself.
Mhm.
Um, Before we even delve into that, how realistic is that?
What in particular?
Do it all yourself.
My first 4 books were all do it myself.
You did the inking, you did the
Yes.
lettering, you did the okay. So that
Even
is
the books
that
I brought today that is all me.
perfect.
Yes.
Because some people, I think it can seem like a huge insurmountable
Mhm.
that like when you open up a Marvel, when you open up Big Guys, there's like 12 people's names listed.
Oh yeah.
And you're like,
oh
I can't do this.
yeah.
Like how am I going to put this out there? Then you self-publish. Either
Mhm.
you find the way to get the money together to go to a printer,
Mhm.
do a Kickstarter, things like that. Then you have sort of, I guess, what I would call like the next level of indie, which would be um, the little, not little in Canada, they're little comic houses.
Mhm.
And is that what you're talking about, sort of writing a pitch to? And would that be your next
Yeah.
step?
Yeah,
Or
probably. And honestly, like I could go bigger, and I might even. I'm still compiling lists of what I'm interested in, and I will say that quickly is if you're going to pitch, don't just throw your pitch at any publisher ever. That's not really how that works at all. Most of them don't even want them or allow you to pitch. You need to curate your book. I'm very cartoony in all ages. I should be going to publishers that are that. So, anyways, that's pretty much what I'm doing.
so who would you consider in Canada?
Mhm.
Who would you consider the next step up for you? Or for anybody who's they've hit the self-publish, they're now at your stage. You're doing this as your full-time job. What's the next step up? The because you can make a good career just doing this, but
Oh yeah.
if you wanted to go next up, where would you say the next level is?
Well, and
Or
for
name
where I'm
companies,
at,
I
I
guess.
suppose that's the thing is I could stick to what I'm doing completely, but my main goal is to do what Bone did for me, which was I opened it and I was just blown away with inspiration. And already I've had kids sending me fan art and they're talking about how excited they are for the next book, and that's really cool, and I'm glad that I can do that. I want to do that for more kids and more teens and adults even who just want to work in comics or enjoy stories,
Mhm.
which means you need to distribute, which then means if you're going to distribute yourself, okay, that's great. You won't have time to draw or write. You will be distributing.
Yeah.
You need to go to a publisher, right? There's some that I'm looking at. Like honestly, I have some people I know at Penguin Random House.
Okay.
That's a great one for the Canadian branch, of course, would be great. But then you're going worldwide as well. I mean, and you don't just have to stick Canadian. But as long as they're open for submissions, or someone that you could show it to, that's where connections and networking comes in. So it's a hard question to answer because you can pitch to anyone really, and there's some smaller ones. There's one in I think they're in Alberta called Gaitha. And I've checked out their stuff. They were at TCAF this year, which is great. They're very, very small, micro press. They do almost newspaper, newsletter-esque comics. They're so interesting and very unique. That's one you can even pitch to. There's another guy I know who runs a publishing company, micropress, called In Service Comics.
Okay.
They do just black and white. I think they just do graphic novels. Could be wrong. They get very niche, which is cool, but it limits what you can do and vice versa. So hope that answered the question.
No, yeah, it does. And then, so I think it's for somebody like me, I'm always curious about the structural organization. Is and certainly when we're looking at the 70s and 80s, life is easy when you're trying to find. You have your indie guys.
Yeah.
We'll take this mid 70s. In Canada, you had Andromeda Press, which was run by the Silver Snail out of Toronto.
Okay.
I
did not know that. That is so cool.
Yeah,
I grew up with Silver Snail. That's awesome.
I do the snail. I miss the snail.
Yeah,
we'll get to that in a minute. But so they ran their own sort of what you call the micro press. Then you have what would become Comely Comics and those guys, which would sort of be Canada's real publisher
Mm-hmm.
in that
Yeah.
time. And then you had the big guys.
Yeah.
Obviously, at that point, I think Dark Horse had sort of started, but then you had Marvel and DC, which were always going to be the big guys.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have that sort of, if we can go that hierarchical structure anymore
No,
in the
and
Canadian
that's when
comic
you said
industry.
real, that's so real because it's like public. That's why I had a hard time answering the question.
Mhm.
Publishing is really weird because it's so accessible and so niche and so yeah. Anyway, I interrupted your question.
No. This is about you, dude. Interrupt all you
It's all
want.
about me. Yeah.
Because if you go back even 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
when Chapter House started. Now I know there's a whole bunch of drama around Chapter House. I don't want to get into that because I actually don't know. I sort of missed them. But it seemed like we were getting that hierarchical structure in Canada again. They're gone.
Yeah.
And what is it called? Comic?
Is it
Comic House?
I think it's comic, and I don't even know if that
is still a thing anymore.
Man, I don't think it is. It's weird,
especially
is. With what happened with Diamond 2. Stuff got crazy weird.
Yeah, so. and unfortunately with Diamond going the way of the dodo, like one of the best things to ever happen to the comic industry, and the worst thing to ever happen to the comics industry was Diamond Distributor.
Honestly,
because those little guys could get them like prior to that. I was talking with somebody about it. Prior to that, you had Comico, who was just killing it with getting themselves into comic book stores. The second the Diamond came around and direct publishing came out, they couldn't adapt. I don't understand how they could not adapt. Like it was one of the easiest things, but they couldn't, and they died. And then, so Diamond was really, really great for getting people like Kitchen Sink Press and Chaos and the resurgence of Vampirella and all those guys into it. But they were also just horrible to deal with and just horrible human beings to begin with. Now with them gone, I worry about the sort of next tier up because you're self-publishing and self-distributing. Well, the next tier up, where you can't do it yourself, as you said, it would be your. I'm just like throwing my hand in front of the camera. Yeah. They're taking over. Sorry, they can't self-publish or self-distribute. They have to rely on a distributor, and now that main distributor is gone, and the comic book industry itself is trying to feel it out. But here in Canada, we just have a bunch of like sort of random, slightly bigger than a micro press, but not really. You've got the guys out of the Newmarket, Richmond Hill area. What are they called?
Wayside.
Yeah.
You're talking about Wayside.
Yeah. But we're not. They're all still, it feels to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, they feel to be at that on Andromeda Press, Silver Snail level. And every time Canada tries to get to even the Comely level, we fall apart. And you're sort of on the insider side. Why do you think that is? What do you think it is about the and this is coming from a guy who's now studying the Canadian comic industry from the beginning, from the Weka period, where when we had no competition, life was great. We could publish whatever we want. It was fantastic. Yeah. The second competition came in, we fell apart. And you look at that with Comely Comics and stuff like that. Like when he was just focused on publishing stuff in Canada, it worked out. The second he tried to get bigger, it all fell apart. Chapter House Comics fell apart once we hit this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, and we could talk about that for whole hours, right? But to keep it simple, I mean, a lot of this industry, in the bigger sense, is American. And that I'm not talking about the people, because the artists even are all around the world. But the industry and the characters and the companies are America. So when it's Canadian, I think there's also Canadian identity to it as well, where it's same with me, as I could be going to publishers, specifically in the States, the big guys or whatever. The first thing I think is, man, I want to keep it local because I love my locals. And I'm just jumping a step up from like this Ontario area upward, right? I actually even have a show in Victoria, BC next year that's just like great. I can even just go to another province and start a fan base there, right?
Mhm.
But in terms of publishing, it's like awesome. If I can just get it to my local shops in Canada, that's cool. And if I can get it anywhere else, even better. When you want to go big, yeah, it's weird, honestly. It's hard to answer too.
It is. It's something I've never quite understood
Mm-hmm.
as to why Canadians, and this might be more sociological and cultural,
Mm-hmm.
that we don't, on an indie level, we support our own.
Mm-hmm.
But the second it goes bigger than that, we don't support it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, yeah, it's a weird one. And if you have thoughts on it, please, because it's, as a historian, as an anthropologist, I'm like, this is just weird. Why,
Mm-hmm.
like we still cling on Captain Canuck, but you know,
Well, and that's why I said there's a Canadian identity to it, because Joel Ullman's This Is Serious anthology, it's only Canadian comics, cartooning even, I should say, because obviously Joel Ullman's a cartoonist, and I say cartoonist meaning cartoon comic
Mhm.
strips, that kind of different than an issue or whatever, newspaper comics. Um, he kept it all Canadian, and when you're reading it, you're just so inspired of this like early '70s, like this the Canadians were killing it, right? And you're
Mhm.
like, this is so cool. You don't even think about the rest of the world. You're just like, Canada, yeah, right?
Yeah.
So I find there's Canadian identity to that. But when there's already established powers in America for that stuff, I guess it's just interesting. I don't know.
But even like, and it's interesting that you brought up that time period,
Mm-hmm.
because that's when Chris Claremont and John Bryn were in, not Chris Claremont, John Bryn, for sure, was in London, Ontario,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and Chris Claremont was in Canada for his youth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these heavily influenced them, and they brought it down. And there are a number. Tom
Mm-hmm.
McFarlane, probably
Yep.
the most famous Canadian comic book guy.
Yep.
Um, and they maintain their Canadian identity, but they've had to go down to the U.S. Like, whenever they try and do stuff up here, it just kind of doesn't. And I
I was gonna say there's some comic creators I know who are even from London, and some of them go venture forth from Ontario, but a lot of them they're going to LA.
Mhm.
And I still don't know the answer of like why are you like how and why are you in LA now? It's interesting. I don't know.
Well, and I think it comes down to that. If you want to get to that, Image, Marvel,
Mm-hmm.
DC level, you can't do it from here,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that really bothers me, because we have incredibly talented artists, writers, inkers, colorists up here, and and maybe I'm a little bit off on this, and please tell me, and that's why we're doing this sort of stuff, is it almost feels like we're self-sabotaging in some ways. Both, not necessarily the artists, because I don't think you guys want to self-sabotage. You like the money and stuff like that, but the fan base and the stuff like that, and it's links to some other stuff I'll get into in a minute. But what do you think about the industry up here trying to?
And that's the other thing too is I had never considered in my life, uh, let me just say maybe 3 years ago, I never would have thought in my head I need to go to New York Comic Con with a portfolio because I'm just like I can make my books anywhere I want. I can do it right here. But you hit a point where you're like, I want to level up. I say
Mm-hmm.
leveling up. I want to level up, or I want to do something different, or I want to work on something big, and vice versa, or I'm going to meet people like me. And when the industry is very big and very centralized in the States, I'll never forget this year at London Comic Con, Jeff Monk, who works on Spawn covers, Canadian. Um, I don't know if he's in London, but anyways, Canadian. We were talking. We were actually doing a live drawing session at one of the panels at London Comic Con this year, 2025. First time ever doing that. I was so scared, but I had Jeff beside me who does Spawn covers, so I was good. But anyways, we were talking, and I said, "How did you get to work on Spawn covers? That's so cool."
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing he said was, "I have two stories for this. Quick."
I don't know. Just take as much time as you want.
He said, I took my portfolio. I believe he said he went to the New York Comic Con and he talked to every single person there and every artist and writer and editor and whoever else. Because New York, that's where it
Mm-hmm.
is. And that's a huge Comic Con and you're going where the industry is.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, keep drawing. Then I got to meet Steve McNiven, who was at the London Con. which was so cool because I didn't even realize till I was talking with him that he did Guardians of the Galaxy when I was growing up, which is just like, whoa. Anyways, super cool guy.
Mm-hmm.
Went to school at Western,
Yep.
which is like, what the heck? So it's just weird. And we're talking, and I said, how did you get into this industry? And he said, I took my portfolio. I went to the New York and San Diego Comic-Con and talked to
I'm making
everyone.
notes.
Yeah, it's all good. Honestly, take notes, please. He said, I took my portfolio and I went to the New York and San Diego Comic-Con and talked to every single person I could. Obviously, this is a little different for him because it was, I believe, the 90s when it was easier to get a job then, right?
Yeah.
But he was talking to people, and boom, you make a connection. Jeff said he went and he made a connection for Spawn. Done. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. I wish, but that's the thing is when the industry, especially that big in terms of Comic Cons, and so like the culture is there in those hot spots.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, as much as I want to keep it Canadian as I can, just because I love my country and the people here, when I want to level up, where do I have to go?
Well, and one of the things I'll say is it's really nice staying in Canada doing stuff local and indie.
Mm-hmm.
But the worst part about being a starving artist is starving.
Yes.
And having a constant, consistent gig, mm-hmm. not having to worry about where the next paycheck's coming from, whether or not you're eating ramen and Cheerios. I will say to anybody listening that if you criticize a Canadian artist or Canadian creator for going to the States and getting work, you don't quite understand it because you have to do it.
It's the name of the game.
Yeah.
It's the nature of this, at least in this particular industry. And you can be very successful here on your own, but depending on your goals and where you want to be in this industry, that's how it is.
And it doesn't mean you have to sell out to Marvel or DC. No. There's hundreds of other places to work and people to collaborate. And just you as an artist, I understand you write as well, but mm-hmm. artist. Imagine getting the chance to work with some of the, like as you said, networking through there. Or, you worked with Scott, mm-hmm. And that's been an incredibly fruitful. But going down and I'm really bad with current names, so I'm using the guys I know. But like, imagine like Chris Claremont as an example has done some really weird independent stuff. Frank Miller, but.
Yeah.
Like honestly, if Frank Miller came up to you and said, "Hey, I like your stuff. I want to work with you." Are you going to say no?
Well, I wouldn't want to. No. I mean, I wouldn't want to say no. That's the thing.
No, if he came up with what was it, Holy Terror or whatever, you'd be like, Frank, no.
Sure, yeah. But I mean, that's the thing is, like I said, there's so much talent and stuff here, but even when the Canadians are going over there, from the past or even now, and they're all there. They're not always going to come to the Toronto Fan Expo or the Vancouver Fan Expo. So it hits a point where if I even want to network to even get those options, because there's the other thing too. It is easy to make a comic book if you love it. Mm-hmm. It's easy to make some sales, go to a market and support your local spot, right? But you will not be picked up if you aren't seen. Mm-hmm. And that's even what Steve McNiven said. Is he's like, you're going to get your little spot here. But until you venture out further, even just me going to BC is venturing further. The further out you're going, the more your name and your look and your name and your like logos and whatever are going to be out there. Because there's a million other people trying to do what you're doing. Yeah. And they can only filter out so much. So that's the thing is venturing out even to something so big as New York Comic Con. If you talk to that right person and they love your work, done. And you wouldn't have done that if you didn't go.
No, there's the other side of it, and getting out to these cons, getting out to stuff has to take up a huge amount of your time and energy. Mm-hmm. But would you say it's a necessity?
Part of it. It's part of the job, honestly, is the travel and sometimes not even working. Working as in like making sales at a table. I've gone to shows just with my portfolio, and it's like, yeah, I could have spent that entire day plus the commute or maybe even the hotel and the night over drawing or working on something, but you just got to manage your time and money to be able to do that, because that's even some of the big guys still have to do that for the sake of it, right? That's just how it is.
Yeah. The game. The more I've been doing this, particularly on Instagram and stuff like that, following these guys and seeing them, big names, still going to convention, which I love because it means you get a chance to meet them as you got to sit there and draw beside them. I can't draw, but it's just in that environment has got to be one of the coolest things.
It's
And
weird.
yeah.
I say weird because it hits a point where they're your friends and not who they were a year ago to you. So there's people I've had to meet. Like even I had the opportunity this year at Niagara Falls Comic Con to have dinner with Bob Camp, and
Very cool.
it's just at first I was like starstruck, and then by the end of it, and even now just chatting with everyone in that group chat and all that jazz, I'm like, these are just my friends, which
Yeah.
is just cool, right? And that, yeah, so
And to me, that's one of the instances where we talked about a little bit earlier, that mental switch. When you get to that point where he's no longer Camp, Mr. Camp,
yes,
it's like, hey, Bob.
yeah,
Or he calls you by your first name. You're like,
it's weird.
and you're like, and the first time you respond back to, oh, Bob, you're just like,
Yeah.
I've done it with professionals in my industry,
Mm-hmm.
Where, as you said, a year ago, I'm looking up to them. Now they're a colleague.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a freeing experience, but it's so weird in that first little bit.
Even meeting new, well, even so, that same show, I got to talk with Dan Parent for Archie, and then even at the time, I was still getting closer with some artists, even locals here like Derek Lothman, who I've known for a while, but we'd never spoken much. The more we talked, it was just like, oh, like we're friends now. But even these people have the bigger guys that they're like, whoa, and I'm like, I was scared to talk to you, and you're scared to talk to them. Wow, but
Yeah.
that's the thing is, like you said, that professional switch. You remember they're just people. So there's people at fan expos I get to meet, and I'm like, I've never met you before, but you're just a guy, which is awesome. So
To me, I've been very, very fortunate in my life to meet a lot of what people would consider celebrities, and I learned very, very early on. If you ever want to meet celebrities, become a roadie.
yeah,
Also, it humanizes them almost instantly. When you see them back there stuffing their face because they're free food, you're like, okay,
yeah.
your person is fine. It gets over the starstruck really, really easily. But the second you start treating them as people, one, anybody who's any sort of name who doesn't have the huge ego, Rob Liefeld, they want to be treated like a person, and treat them like a person. I think, as we're talking about earlier, the networking, as you say, bringing your portfolios. If you're like, oh my God, Mr. McFarlane, can you? They're gonna be like,
yeah.
But if you treat them like a person, now Tom McFarlane may not be the best example. There's a little bit of an ego there,
Yeah, sure.
But he actually, from everything I've seen, he's actually really nice to his fans and to people who come up.
He's a very happy, inspirational person.
It's really
he knows what he wants, but
Yeah.
honestly, I find it very respectable, but it's a lot. But
Yeah,
anyway,
he as a person is a lot,
Yeah.
and I think he's somebody that I would love to talk to, just because he is arguably the pinnacle of Canadian comic book creation. He's not only just in the work that he's done, but what he's done for the industry, how he's transformed it. But when you're around somebody with that sort of intensity and drive, it's a lot.
Yes.
But I wanted to talk quickly about sort of conventions and stuff like that. And in the comic book convention world now, there seems to be a split happening. And there's sort of the fan expo side of things, which is this multimedia extravaganza where comic books almost feel like they're taking the back seat. The Toronto Fan Expo was the second largest or third largest comic book convention in the world, depending on the year. It's SDC and New York City, and I think that SDCC, and New York are sort of the example of what I want to talk about. The New York Comic Con still feels like a Comic Con. It is.
I've never been, and I've heard that it does feel that way. Still Comic Con.
So we can even break it here, because I know you went to both. You have essentially the London. Maybe this isn't the best example. Now that I think about it, but we had the London Comic Con and the Forest City Comic Con. And the London Comic Con is now feeling like it's trying to get more towards the fan expo side of things. The Forest City Comic Con, for positives and negatives, still feels like it wants to be a comic book convention. Which do you think, as a creator, is better? One, to I'm trying to find the phrase. Forgive the phrasing. Hawk your wares. it's the first one that came to mind. I apologize.
I know what you're trying to say.
From you as selling stuff, but B as networking.
Networking. Here's where I stand on it. I have learned, unless you're going to have a huge booth and do a lot of fan art I like doing fan art. Commission me for fan art. But I don't do many prints. I love doing comics, period. I'll do some sketch cards, I'll maybe do a couple prints, maybe. But I mostly just push for my comic sales. I'm not going to sell anything else because I just want people to read my books. I want people to enjoy the story. I don't like sealing my books like in the sleeve, because you should be taking it out to read it. But anyways, that's how I take it. So when I've done the big shows like fan expos and all that jazz, sorry, I don't do very well. I mean, depending on the show, I'll do well. Maybe I'll make the table or a little more. But it hits a point where I'm stuck behind a table and it's so busy, I don't even get a chance to network. It's just making the sales, making fans, which is huge. You make a sale to someone, hopefully they come back, right? That's big, right? When you start, you should definitely be jumping into those big shows. But I've learned that the smaller the show or the more comic friendly the show, I even do markets, just little like there's the Horton Market in St. Thomas, Icebox, and all that jazz. Just smaller markets, you're gonna make more sales. The bigger shows like Fan Expo, I told you Niagara Falls this year, I didn't even go for a table. I just brought my portfolio, because now I'm not sitting there thinking, oh, I gotta make my money back for the table and the hotel and whatever. Now I'm like, great, I can make money selling my books at another show or being paid to do interiors. Today, I'm meeting artists and writers and editors, and that's going to get me jobs later. So, and that's another mental switch of being a professional, is you're not just making fun books, going to your 9 to 5, going to a market and making money. You've gone from, I don't need to go to a show to make my money. I can be paid to do comics. The big shows are more for meeting people. I think it's even more fun that way, personally, is, oh, I know this artist that inspired me big time is going to be at this fan expo. I'm not going to spend however much money on a table and never go meet them because we're both too busy. I'm going to go just meet them. But it depends on what you're doing. If you make a lot of fan art, especially anime, you're going to make a lot of money at a fan expo. So yeah, it depends on your goals. I think they're both very important to go to, but especially the smaller ones, support your smaller shows. It's just like supporting a local comic shop. They need you to survive, so go. Why not?
Cool.
I know that maybe answered the question.
No. Yeah, we're on track for it.
Cool.
I think it's one of the things, like you're talking about bring your portfolio, and I think that for somebody like me who's never done this, has no idea what the hell you're talking about. Okay. How does that process work? Like, let's say, because what I've seen is when you're going up to artists and stuff, there are the people, particularly at the bigger shows, who are like have a stack of comics because they're going to resell them, and you can tell that just grates on them. As a matter of fact, really lucky. One of my friends went to the Detroit, I think it was the Motor City Comic Con or the Detroit Comic Con, whichever one it was, and Art Adams was there. And Art Adams is one of my favorite artists of all time. And my buddy brought one of my comics, and he's like, Art Adams is going to be there. I have enough money to get him to sign one. Which one of your comics? And I have his. Fiscally speaking, if I had got him to sign the cover for, I think it's Marvel Team Up 92 or whatever, the black costume first appearance, the first appearance of the black costume, that would have been more fiscally. But I actually got him to sign a copy of Uncanny X-Men Annual number 10.
Okay.
It's the first appearance of the X-Babies.
Cool.
Which is a wonderful, from a historian and that sort of stuff. It's a wonderful commentary on because it's a Mojo World story, and it's child star exploitation and the disposability. It's a great little story, but it's also Art Adams art. Yes. And my friend went up, and you could tell that Art Adams had a day. And my friend goes, it's for a friend of mine, and he'd like you to personalize it. And there's actually like 3 or 4 lines on there, and he didn't charge him for it.
Oh. Okay.
Because he was just so happy that somebody wanted it for a personal collection. So, I think reading the artist or the writer that you're going to go up to, if they've had a day of people like, with a photograph there for CGC to get it slabbed, maybe not. But but assuming that they're open, now that we got all that out of the way, how do you approach them? How do you start that collaboration with your portfolio under your arm? I assume
that is a very important question. First of all, I'm going to talk about how to curate your portfolio.
Ooh, please.
That is very important, because portfolios come with like 60 pages to fill. Don't fill all 60 pages and say, look at my portfolio. They're not only going to go, I guess I can look, they're going to open it and go, like they're not going to want to.
It's good.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Great. First of all, and I won't go into the detail of curating a portfolio because I'll just tell you how I do it, but Raid Studios in Toronto.
Those were the guys I was thinking of. I was talking about.
Gotcha,
It was Raid.
Raid is interesting for pitching too, which we were talking about earlier.
We'll get back to them at some point.
Anyways, so Raid,
maybe
go on their site, I believe, or at least their Instagram. They have a whole video about curating your portfolio because at TCAF this year, the Toronto Comics Arts Festival, they were one of the publishers that you could sign up to do a portfolio reading, which is another big one. At things like TCAF, you can sign up early and for a time slot, and someone like a publisher like Raid or Drawn and Quarterly or whoever will sit down and look at your portfolio, which is huge. But they said in preparation for that show, this is what you should bring us, and if it's more or less, then you failed, right? That we're not going to really care, which is huge. So I believe the first thing they said was,
we've given you the rubric.
That's
follow the rubric.
Exactly. Otherwise, they're just it's like pitching to an editor. They don't want to read 6 pages about how your comic's going to be insanely amazing, right? Anyways, for portfolios, obviously, if your main goal is comic interiors, you should have sequential art in there. You should have something for action, something that's very speech heavy. And by that, I mean you don't have to letter, but you should know how to have room for your speech balloons when you draw, because you're not putting any in there, you're just drawing. And you hope that little space has room for the letterer, right? And then make sure your characters aren't boring. Like, are they doing this? Or are they just standing like this when they're talking, right? So you should have sequential art for action, for lettering, or at least speech, like maybe a conversation. And then the other one might have been, I mean, it could be anything. It could be, if it's horror, there should be something with a monster, or maybe landscapes even. There should be just like scenery, maybe a splash page of a city or a landscape or something, right? Anyways, so I think they said you should have 2, 4, 6 of those, and then you should have a total of 10 pages. After that, it should be your best work in covers or anything else. I've heard that the most strong portfolios don't always have comic work in it. I used to do animal portraiture. If they know that you can draw Superman, okay, cool, yeah, you can draw Superman. Whoa, you can draw a realistic dog. Or, oh, wow, you do architecture really well. Or maybe you do action lines, like movement very well. I'm a very gestural artist, so I really like bouncy, moving, wiggly stuff. So if I can showcase that is my main niche, that's what you should be showing. So anyways, that's how you have an effective portfolio. Go watch Raid's video, those are better on it. But for at least showing people, now we've gone back to what we were talking about.
We always have to get there.
That's
like
right.
There's always stuff you have to go before you get there.
So much. But if you can't pick a time slot, it is difficult to come and show your portfolio. My rule for myself, and I don't know if it's the best rule, is when I go up to them, I don't instantly say, "Hi, I love your work. Can you look at my portfolio?" I tuck it under my arm. I don't even touch it, and I talk to them. So when I met Steve McNiven at London, I forgot about my portfolio. It was under my arm, and I was just talking to him because I was like, "Oh, you went to Western? Oh, you're from London and whatever." Like, it was just interesting, and you've made a friend. You're not networking. You've made a friend. Read the room. Read the person. Are they really tired from signing all day? Are they just want to go home? Or maybe sometimes your heroes, your idols, are rude. Maybe you're like, maybe I don't want this guy to look at my stuff, Read it. And if they seem really excited to talk to you, be very kind and just say, "Would you mind looking at my portfolio? I'd really appreciate it." And if they say no, leave. Like, you just, "Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it." Or just keep talking, whatever, if you're having good conversation. But if you force it, you're not going to get anything good out of it. I've even had some bigger creators, I didn't even get to ask. They said, "I see the portfolio's under your arm. I'm thinking you want me to look at it." And I'm like, "Would you mind?" "Oh, of course," right? They're going to, right? You got to read the room, though. If they're tired, they don't want to do it. But especially if they are a little tired and they don't mind, at least you only have 10 pages in there. They're not going to break their back.
Yeah. Okay. So in that instance, so again, coming from a complete outsider on this, one, learn to read the room. But that's a skill you're going to need to get in life. Yes. And so many people don't have it. Please learn that skill.
Yes, it's huge. And you don't second guess it either. If you're like, this person seems annoyed, they're annoyed. Go. You just please.
But then, like, you're literally just like, you've got your portfolio tucked onto your arm, and you're visiting their booth, and you're just and And for me,
and I should say that because you're talking about getting in line and signing and all that. If they're a really big artist, you're gonna get in line or whatever, but they usually don't mind. Depends who you're meeting, of course. But anyways.
No, so but that's just it. Like, and it's the confidence of being able to tuck it up under your arm and go talk to them. And I found now, and again, I haven't been to a major Comic-Con in a very long time, but like, you can sit there and talk with them, and you can even sort of step to the side and continue the talking while they sign, because there are a lot of people, particularly the bigger artists, that they don't want to have that conversation. They want you to sign their copy of Amazing Fantasy 15.
Yeah.
Okay, not that. That would be lovely.
That'd be crazy.
I don't think anybody involved with that is alive. So if there's some signing going on, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
But and you can just step to the side and keep talking with them, and that's how you're going to form that relationship. And I think that one of the biggest things that we've come down to, and I think that we'll move on a little bit, is to get into this industry, to really survive. It's the relationship building. It's that, and forgive me for paraphrasing, or at least summarize, or putting my own interpretation to it. It's not even the collaborations, as you talked about. You're making friends, and these friends are going to support you and keep you sane, and it's that support network that you're building within it that will happen to collaborate with you in pleasant ways. It is a job. You are going to be working with people who you might not want to, or you're not going to be friends with, or who are just jerks.
Yep. There will always be those. Always. How it is.
Having dealt with musicians and stuff, there's sort of this middling level that people get to where they think that they're the shit.
I believe that.
And
I've heard of music that is
the worst human beings in the world. When they're first starting, you meet the guys first starting out, they're absolutely amazing. They're fantastic. And then, a lot of them will continue with that attitude. But some of them will hit this sort of like middling level, think that they've achieved something, and they're just the most insufferable people to be around. And I'm sure you've seen it in your industry that once people, that there are a certain type of people that think that they get to a level and they can be mean to other people, they can be jerks. And then you get to, we were talking, Todd McFarlane is incredibly nice to his fans. Jim Lee is ridiculously nice to his fans. And they are the top of, like, there's nowhere to go beyond, particularly Jim Lee.
Exactly.
It's like, he's the guy in charge of DC.
Yeah.
And he'll sit there and spend 20 minutes, like, seeing videos on it of him just talking with, like, a fan.
It's incredible.
So
incredible.
But there will be the jerks, and you have to learn how to deal with them, because you can't just blow them off, because they are, there will be a name, and unfortunately, having a name attached to your stuff helps you.
You need to. There are people. Honestly, there are people I don't like in this industry. That I love a lot of people, and there are people where I'm like, man, I don't want to work with you, or man, I don't want to be talking to you, or whatever, right? But just like at work, you have to meet people and you have to work with them, and sometimes you're at a booth beside them, right? What I'll give as advice, especially because this industry seems very difficult to get into, when you meet those people, whether they are top dogs, sure, but whether they are or they just think they are and they're really good at faking it till they make it, don't sit there and envy it, honestly. There was a point where these people, they're just rude, but I'm like, they've done this and they've got this and they're a guest at this, and it made me feel like, but I got to get to that, and if this hole can do it, that sucks, right? And I have to look up to him. You don't. It's just that, like you said, they hit a middling point where they're stuck there. Honestly, they're gonna stay there, and then you can pass them later. They're just a coworker. That's just how it is.
That's really good. So I want to talk about your work too. We've been talking about the industry and stuff.
It's all good. Yeah.
But I want to talk to you. So you brought some stuff with you. Do you want to show it before I?
Yeah.
And tell me about it.
So this one is it in?
You're good.
Shot? Okay.
You're good.
So this is the Flooded Planet Overflow. The first one did really well, but the second one that released this year was the bestseller. So this book in particular, the second one in particular, is the first book that I ever did traditionally. I'll show it off because it is very stark the difference. I don't know if it shows nicely or not. Unless.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you see that work, and then this.
Sorry, I want to see the art.
It's all good. Yeah, I'll throw it your way. So this is the first book. So it is quite different. This is when I digitally drew in pixels, not in vectors. So please take a look at the second one. But
you can forgive me for those. Both art is really good,
Yeah, and
but you can
yeah,
see a
there's a difference.
dramatic shift.
There's a difference. And so I'll say 2023, January of 2023 is when this first book came out. This one released May 2025. So at one point, I actually stopped working on my own books and just started doing anthologies, which we'll talk about. But this series in particular, bestseller. I did Wendy and the Sprite chapters 0 to 3 as my first books, and then I got a little more familiar with making comics, learning how it all works, and even just trying going from vectors, as we talked about previously. I don't know if it was when I was recording or not, but I used to draw with vectors.
Mm-hmm.
I switched to pixels, so a lot more, for me at least, I can get more detail. That's when I did this book. And because of that detail and actually moving faster with making the book, and I got used to the medium, so I was learning how to properly change up my panels, and I wanted to do a new story that's still related to the other one. I have a really big story written, but anyways, that's when I did this book, did some anthologies for a while, and then when I switched to traditional, I was like, this is the book that kids loved, because we printed it at 9 by 12 just because I wanted to try a weird size. Freaking huge, man.
Mm-hmm.
Kids loved it because it was huge. The dialogue was simple and it was super colorful. So kids were really enveloped in it. And then they see my other books, Wendy and the Sprite, and they were like, what is this? I'm like, that is thousands of years in the past. Enjoy. So then they got to read the other series, and that's when I started working on these. Anyways,
That's cool.
I kind of delved into a different world. I can explain the different series if you want, or what do you think?
I want to know about your work, so tell me about your work.
Okay. So, the first 3 books, not that I'm kind of retconning them, they're not retconned or anything, but they're so old, 2020, and I was so new that I'm kind of doing a reboot of the series. So I'm gonna have 3 series going. This is my all drawn, written, colored, everything by me. Wendy and the Sprite, about a snow person and an ice ball. They're going on a big adventure on a snow planet. Pretty much. This snow person named Wendy was born in a mountain, completely alone, and spent their whole life growing up with no communication, people, or sunlight. And they come out of this mountain and they're like, whoa, this is cool, like beautiful world. So they're a very overly excited creature who can't speak, who meets an ice ball in the middle of like wartime on this planet. Very much bone, where it's like it's for kids, and then it's going to get a little more serious and dark, but a lot of life lessons. That's my main story. Wendy and the Sprite. It's going to be probably 8 to 10 arcs, all about 10 issues each. So it's going to be pretty long. I'm writing it and doing the art. Peyton Atkinson is my colorist, so she's like my number one. My other series, which is the big one that people love, is the Flooded Planet Overflow. So this snow planet, thousands of years later, melts and it floods. So this flooded planet is where these 4 creatures, who live in a very black and white, dull world on the surface, come down to a very colorful, beautiful under the sea world, that has been completely abandoned from robots. There's just robots and destroyed stuff and just destroyed cities. So they're exploring it. This will be a 16-book graphic novel series, so all around 40, maybe 50-page books. These, I believe the first one's 38, the second one's 44 pages. So those are my 2 big series. I'm going to have a third one that's going to be 3 books long only, all around 200, 250 pages. That will be far from now because it's going to be the big one, the big story that's set before all these. But
okay.
So yeah, I personally like to tell stories that all ages can enjoy, kind of like putting on an episode of Sailor Moon where, you're just having fun, but if you're watching, you're like, whoa, there's like stuff going on, like there's a plot right now. That's what I like to do. So I pitch it for kids, but if adults want to pay attention to something interesting, that's that. It's a very personal story, honestly, about my upbringing as an artist. I live in a small town that, at least growing up, if you were going to go into art, you're going to be a really good landscape painter, or you're not going to be an artist, and you should probably do graphic design. That's what I grew up with. That's how my journey started. And especially when art is usually seen as, you're going to be an artist. Yeah, no, you need to go do something that will make you money. that's what a lot of this story is reflected as.
Okay.
Very personal experience that I think a lot of kids can enjoy and make them feel included and understood and feel like they can take on the world.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you sort of talked about it, but
Mhm.
how does the process work of, because you're doing everything,
Yeah.
do you have scenes in your head that you then try and put on paper, both art and
Mhm,
words?
mhm.
And how does, like, do you stumble, like, I was going to say, do you stumble? Of course you stumble.
Yes.
You're human. How do you deal with that, and how do you deal with the incongruities that happen between that in your head?
We'll talk about it after these books, but I'll just delve into it quickly. Scott and I, on Monster of the Abyss, Scott Wojcik, is a really good example of how a comic is really made, honestly. I mean, when it comes to the big three, it's going to be a different process because it goes through like 10 different hands, obviously. But when it comes to indie, or at least a work that you love and is not corporatized, I suppose, um, it is a lot of back and forth, and there's a lot more changes than you'd think.
Mhm.
So Scott, even like I said, he gave me like 6 to 8 pages. I made it 16. And he's like, whoa, okay, now I need to move all this dialogue. And not that he was annoyed with it. He loved that it was 16 pages. But now things change.
Mhm.
So I have read, it's like a game of telephone. He gave me the words. I storyboarded how it would look in panels. And then he took it and went, cool, can we change this? And I'm like, yep, okay, changed. And he goes, cool, now we need to move this speech bubble because of how you drew this character. Oh, okay, like it's a lot of moving.
Mhm.
By yourself, first of all, do whatever feels natural. I have had writers go, "Is there a correct way to write a comic?" And I'm like, "No." I've point formed my book before. I just, yeah, character does this, character does that, done. And then I've made a whole book that way. I actually think the first book was point form, was
Really?
just, this is how I want the story to go. And then I storyboarded it page for page, and I went, oh, I guess it's 38 pages, right? The second book was a little different just because I learned more. It became, I saw the movie in my head, how I wanted it to go. I wrote it out, sort of panel for panel, more page for page of how the movie looked in my head.
Mhm.
Then I storyboarded it. And the movie looked so different because when I was writing it, I saw a character jump, right? But then as I'm drawing it, I'm like, that doesn't look as good as I thought it would. So I'm going to change it to them just sliding or something like that, or something simple, right?
Mhm.
And plus, you're doing paneling now. So you go
Mhm.
from page for page. Yeah, these characters are running and then they're jumping off a mountain and grabbing onto a bird to fly away. Well, now you're paneling it out and you're like, oh, whoa, how many panels are going on this page? Where is this character going to jump? Where's the camera set, right? It's the camera.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the process is delicate and it will change, always will change. Even when you think you've set room for lettering, you go, shoot, that actually, maybe it doesn't fit there, or maybe it would look better if I split up the bubble to a different panel. It will change, right?
Mhm.
Um, but definitely give yourself the patience to let it change. I know a lot of people who want to get into comics who are very they're perfectionists, which is okay. But if you spend too much time planning the book, it will not be made. And then you
Mm.
haven't made a book. So yeah, the process can vary. That's how I do it personally. If that answers your question, there I
Yeah,
could go into the details of all of it, honestly.
go for it.
Okay, well, so I'll start. I'll start with writing.
Go for it.
Uh, Write it like a novel is how I used to do it. I used to write it just, I would describe everything, and that's just how I wanted it. So that later I knew exactly what I was thinking. I've point formed it where I point formed every page, and maybe every point's a panel, or maybe it's just, this is what I want on that page.
Okay.
Some people do it for panel for panel. I know a lot of writers I've worked with have done it panel for panel. And as just the artist not co-creating it, you need to try your best to stick with their vision. That's what the storyboard's for, so you can tell them your vision's wrong.
It's not going to work that way.
Not gonna work. No. So that's your scripting, right? And this is assuming you're doing everything yourself. Um, then you get into penciling. So penciling can be your storyboard, or it could just be your pencils. I tend to just jump in. I'm a rebel like that. I'm like, I have the script, great. Get out the 11 by 17 page and pencil it. That's just how I work. But a lot of people will get out a smaller book and stick figure it. I stick figure it sometimes for other writers. who are not me, and they need a visual first. Stick figure it panel for panel. So then the question I get a lot is how many panels go on a page?
Oh.
And that's a hard question. My rule, if you want a rule, is 5 to 7, maybe 4 to 6. It depends. Some of the best comics have 3 panels. Some of the Watchmen has 9, right? They got their grid. I've seen pages with a page with like 17 panels. Actually, the Absolute Batman Origin issue, I forget which one that was. So like tiny panels, and it looks so cool. Oh, so many panels on a page. Depends on your vibe. If it's really action packed and fast, you might throw in a lot of panels because what you're doing as when you're paneling is you need to think of the eye, where the eye is going, left to right in a comic, not a manga, but left to right, and how fast is it supposed to go? Where is it supposed to direct when you're doing it? That's a lot of storyboarding and compositions. I could get into that forever.
I'm actually going to pause you there because I want to talk about there's sort of the traditional gold and silver age paneling, which is about six panels in a grid.
Yeah,
we stay with this. Occasionally, you'll have a splash page.
Yeah.
Carry on. Once you start getting into the 90s was when they started to really the rebels breaking the rules and breaking the gutters apart. Do you have some inspiration, or do you like that classic? I wanted to be a grid. And
this book might be a really good example of it. I love just rectangles. I like to keep it simple personally, because when you don't keep it simple, you've made a huge impact. It's I guess for inspiration, to me, in comics, every decision you make has a purpose. And if it doesn't have a purpose, you have not made a good comic, usually. The reason I say that is because if you just throw a panel there just to have it there, sure, you've made a comic and it could be a good comic, but you've now taken out that artistic part of what a comic is. You usually almost every panel has a purpose. If it doesn't have a purpose, you could probably cut it. Even a panel, I just worked on a book recently where the character was just, and that's it. But that purpose of him just sitting there looking at you does something. It's like when movies were really good and they used to have 30 seconds of just someone staring and having emotion, because that's, you know what I mean? When movies weren't just bam, bam, bam. So that's what's important in a book. For paneling, like I said, I love doing regular squares and rectangles. I like cartoony stuff though, just peanuts, just rectangles. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, no, I just think that to your point, that if it, for the older days and for guys like me, that was your way you read the story. But when somebody broke it, that was the impact. Something big is happening where they're breaking the gutters. There's a splash page with 3 panels inside of it. This was huge. But when it's, I would liken it to swearing. If you swear all the time, it has no meaning.
Yep.
But if something's really happening and you drop an F-bomb and you're not a person who drops it all the time, when that F-bomb hits, it has a huge impact. And I think that you're talking about the grids. That's the storytelling. And maybe I'm just old.
No, but that is usually how it's done. When you get too funky too much, people get used to it. I know at one point, I forget what book I was reading. It might have been a new Respawn book, or maybe Deadpool in 2016 or something, when there was so much happening on pages that I wasn't even looking at the art. I was reading the bubbles and going, because there's just so much. What I like to do, you have your rectangles. But for example, I have my new book, Wendy and the Sprite, Chapter 3, Issue 1, coming out in February, hopefully. Don't quote me on that. Where a lot of it's rectangles.
We're going to hold you to
it. Darn it, it's on camera. Wendy gets a wand, and Wendy's like, whoa. Wendy doesn't know anything, right? What the heck does this do? Pow, and then they just shoot it out of the wand, right? A beam flies out. In the next panel, I have a beam shooting across the panel, and then it breaks through the panel off the page. That's where your reader now, it's simple, and not like I'm groundbreaking anything, but your reader now feels that impact with no words. There's just like, whoa, that was a strong shot. It broke through the panel, right? Or there's another spot, I think I might do it in this too, in my Overflow 2 book, where someone's having a flashback or stuff gets a little wonky. So in Wendy and the Sprite, there's a flashback part where it's a big panel at the top, and their eyes are kind of looking confused, and it slowly their eyes bleed into the panels below it. So that's where you're really changing it to where, yeah, it's fun to look at, but what's the purpose of that? What is the purpose of that psyche looking stuff? Now you feel weird. You're like, whoa, okay, Wendy's going through something. That's why I'm reading it this way, right? So you're not just doing it to do it. You're doing it with a purpose, which is huge in panels. Huge.
Well, I think that for anybody coming into this, that is an important statement. That everything you do has to have meaning. There's no, as you said earlier, if it's a throwaway panel, just throw it away.
Yeah.
You know, like there's no point in it being there. You could have told the story in a better, more succinct way. And to be honest, if you're overcrowding it, say you really, really want to stick to Alan Moore's dying panel.
yeah.
If you're forcing yourself into that and you're dividing up as 9 panels, you could have done it in 6, and you could have showcased the art more. Because the biggest criticisms of is it, you know, like it's really hard to see the quality of the art in Watchmen. There's some great instances of it, but those 9 spreads
and the art is unbelievable, and you don't really get a chance to look.
It's not highlighted as much, and you know, for you, there's a good question while we're here.
Okay.
When we're talking about stuff like that, do you concern yourself more with, like, you're telling the story, but it's both a visual and a written medium? Do you find yourself fighting with, I need the words to be more important, or I need the art to be more important?
I find, maybe I just know exactly what I want. I don't have a problem with it, but there are times where, God, no offense. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. There is a collaborative sense. Like I said, comics are a very collaborative medium and industry where there will be fighting of, like, Scott writes a lot. I love you, Scott, but he writes a lot, and there's
he's coming on, by the way.
Oh man, no, that's good. But and he'll say the exact same thing I'm about to say too. We've said it on podcasts multiple times because he writes a lot of dialogue and a lot of descriptions, which is awesome. And that's where the collaboration comes in, because all he has are words. He gives them to me, and all I have is art. And where do those words go? And are the words, especially the descriptive words, properly conveying? We have a new book I can't talk about yet, but he have a lot of new stuff I can't talk about.
Which is great.
This one's a sci-fi, starts in space on a ship. Great, awesome. He's like, I want it to have aliens, like an alien, like the movie. He wants it to have a vibe of aliens, where it's very desolate, very dark, and very right? And there's where your paneling comes in. He gives this description of this dark hallway, and you feel really disoriented looking through the hallway. And I'm like, how do you make that work? And all I did was I drew the hallway and I just tilted it. And now you're looking at it and going, whoa, and your brain just automatically goes, this is an uneasy scene. When it comes to the words, that's where you need to learn that balance of how much should my character be doing? How much should I draw in that background that's going to get covered with a balloon anyways? It's not that I have a hard time with it, but you need to remember that communication is key. Don't just draw it. Talk to your writer and be like, I did it this way, what do you think? Or if this were to happen with the speech balloon, is that going to work? It is such a huge communicative, collaborative medium, and if you don't respect that, it's the same with just throwing in a random panel. Your comic isn't going to work, personally, if that makes sense.
No, it really does, and I find it very, very interesting.
My favorite part about it
is the collaborative aspect.
Well, people, and this is also why I switched to traditional, because people would look at my work, whether they love comics or not, and they're like, this is awesome. And I'm like, I drew it. And they're like, oh, you drew it. And I pull up my portfolio. They're like, whoa, you drew it. And I'm like, yeah, I did. I just said that.
Well,
and everything matters. And everything was a conscious decision sometimes. But you made a decision to make it effective. And that's what makes it so awesome. I love comics.
I think one of my favorite things in going to conventions now, I've said this on a number of things, I really want to get into collecting original art, but not like I picked up some of the other Scott's stuff.
Woods?
Scott Woods. Scott Woods.
Yeah.
And some of Jeff's sketch cards and stuff like that. Amazing. That's great. What I really want to get is the pages. because as you said, I can look at the comic book and it's like, yeah, that's really, really cool. The second you see that original board, it's like, oh, you drew this. Some person, you did this, and you can see the erases and particularly if you get to it, you get the ones before the inker got to it.
Yeah.
And there's something magical about that, and I think it's for fans, getting to see that is transformative. It's no longer a mass-produced consumable object. It is, you've poured, like, hearing you talk about the overflow, about this world with Wendy and the snowball. No, it's not Wendy and the Sprite.
Yeah, nice. I didn't today, but yeah.
You can hear you talking about that, and this isn't something that, when you walk into Heroes or the Snail and you pick the comic book off, you don't really get to hear that or see that. And the vast majority of people don't get to go to conventions and do this, but if you get the chance, seeing that is transformative. And how much now that, so you work in ink and stuff, and how much do you trust yourself, and how much erasing goes into it? How much correction is there? Like, and how much of that bleeds over into the art?
One thing before we get into that, what you were just talking about, is that personal interaction at a con. I just had the opportunity to go on a podcast with Mark Bagley.
All right.
Fantastic. Awesome to talk to about this stuff, and he was on with Ross Ritchie too. So we got to talk about business, being huge in comics, and that's all you know, and then smaller indie. So it was a triple threat of that, which was really cool. But the first thing he said was, he was like, I don't know how you guys do it. And he said, because I've had the privilege to just be, Ultimate Spider-Man. That's just, I could just say that, done deal, right? He's like, and he said, how do you do it? And he said, I'm honestly asking. And the first thing I said was, like you just said, he was like, do you put your books in stores, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah. But the big one is the interaction. Meeting the fans, making the fans, showing the actual heart and soul that goes into these books, and then talking about it and not being able to stop talking about it because it's just so important to you. That's the big part about it. And that's what keeps the indies going and enjoying it. And that personal interaction, like the fans I've been able to make in the London area too, that recognize me even, or even just come for the next book. Even London Con this year, I had kids come to the booth and say, is the next one out? And I'm like holding back tears. Yeah, it is. Here you go. Like, it's just so cool. So that's a huge part of it that was interesting to talk about.
And I think that, like, for the superficial, and I have to say, and we're going to circle back,
of course,
really far back, and then we're going to talk about it. The people who are constantly saying, is the comic book industry dying, or it's dead? You guys are just the remnant.
Throwback.
I don't think they're they're not. I hate using not the true fans, but they're the casual fans. They're the ones who have watched the MCU or the Snyderverse.
Yep.
Ooh, that might get to us.
That's true though. It is, because they're seeing that top layer, and that's it, right?
But there's sort of three levels, I guess, of social interaction. You can see, there's me going into Heroes and seeing the guys that I've seen there for the last year and a half who've been helping me get back into comic books, and and having the conversations with them, and that's that level of community and bringing it in. Then going to the local convention, meeting people like you, and yeah, you're at New York, but you don't get that interaction. It's the small local cons where you get that this, and then you go to the bigger cons and you get to meet Art Adams and stuff like that, and have a 5-minute conversation, which he's probably not going to remember. But for somebody like me, it's like, yeah, okay, that made my day.
Yeah.
I still talk about it when I was very young, under 15.
Okay.
I think 14 or 15. I went to the Toronto Comic Con, which is one of it, like 94, 95. 94. That was the reason I know this. Stephen Platt had just finished his run on Moon Knight, on Mark Spector Moon Knight, and I had the last issue and I got him to sign it.
Awesome.
And he dated it. That's how I know
That's
all this
awesome.
works.
Cool. Okay, cool.
Also, I love the fact, like, if you've ever seen that cover, it's Moon Knight, and he's hit the ground.
Yeah.
And he signs his name S. Platt, so it just says Splat with him.
It's good.
It's a
too.
great
I
thing.
love it.
But I'm sitting in line for Stephen Platt, and as with Comic Cons, particularly at that time, the guy, there was an empty table beside him because the guy couldn't get across the border. Normally, it was just like, I'm coming up. They're like, no, you're actually working. You don't get to come today. And it was very common. And I'm standing there, and there's this older gentleman. He comes up and he's sitting down, and I'm looking at him. That's Stan Lee.
Wow.
And he used to do that back in the day.
Cool. Yeah.
He would just show up at conventions, and he did. And he just sat down at a table. Nobody knew that he was coming. The organizers didn't know.
Crazy.
And I'm like, I love Steven.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go stand with him.
Yeah.
And I got to spend a whole bunch of time just talking with Stan Lee.
Amazing.
And you know, then I got to talk with Stephen Platt. I got to talk, James O'Barr was there as well, because The Crow was in production at that point. And I think that level of interaction, I'm not saying it's a mandatory thing for comic book fans, but it changes your perception of what's going on.
Huge.
And seeing Peyton just sitting there drawing and actually do the work, because I don't think you were drawing when I saw you.
I tend to not work while I'm at a table. I get full business mode, but anyways.
Yeah, it changes your perception of everything, and now in some instances you never want to meet your heroes, because sometimes it doesn't go really well. But in other times it's hugely transformative to the art, to turn it from, as I said earlier, consumable to art. But we were talking about something, and I went off. Inking
in the.
Oh yeah, how do you, like, how much of your correction is in that? Because forgive me, as a you know, like, I'm used to seeing people with pencil and the blue pencil, and that's kind of relatively easy to erase. Talk to me about that.
Well, when I this whole book I did with pencil, very light pencil, and then first time ever traditionally inking, no clue what I was doing. Got 11 by 17 boards with blue line, because that's what you're supposed to do, I guess, when I started. And I bought a brush and an ink well. And I'm like, is this how they do it? And I just dipped the brush, and I'm like, I guess that's how they do it. I didn't practice very much, honestly. I was criticized by my art teachers for that. They'd say, yeah, for your final project, you need 10 sketches. And I do one sketch. I'm like, that's the one. They're like, no, you need 9 more sketches. I do 9 sketches. I'm like, yeah, that first one, that's the one I'm doing. That's how I work. Don't do that, maybe. But yeah,
method.
Yeah, that's just how it is. Like, I just jumped in pencil and thought that looks great. Did a lot. I went on YouTube and looked up a lot on lettering, and I'm like, okay, I think I know how that works, so I won't letter yet. I'll just pencil it and draw it. No, lettering I'll figure out later. Yeah, dipped a brush in ink, and I just said, guess we're just gonna do it. You find your favorite brushes, you feel your rhythm, but it is a lot of just risk. It is scary. That's anything with life. Usually when you jump in for a risk, it's amazing if you can do it. So yeah, I just kind of jumped in and said, do the lines first. You'll figure it out later. And I'm like, whoa. And then that's also when I really started reading more comics. I've read a lot of comics, but when I started this book in August of 2024, maybe, I think. It took me maybe like 6 or 7 months to make this. First book I've ever done fully traditionally, except for color. Anyways, I cracked out the old Batman books, and I'm like, how the heck did these guys ink? Because I'm starting to do the lines, and I'm like, now what? Whoa. And I'm looking, and I'm like, it's funny. As a reader, you're reading it, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, Batman, and he's got the blue cowl, whatever, continue. Then I pulled out the book, and I went, wait, half of his cape right now is just black ink with a little bit of blue. And I'm like, that's genius. And I'm looking, and I'm like, this whole book is just black ink. That's so cool. And that's when I realized, I'm like, I knew how important an inker was. That's when it hit me. I thought, holy crap, your brain just switches it. Oh, it's colored in. And then you're really looking, and you're like, there's so much ink. So that's when I learned. I remember watching a Todd McFarlane video on it. He said, when in doubt, black it out. I'm like, really? And that's when I learned. That was a big one in inking. I realized, and I learned, you need to get used to overusing the blacks. Then you kind of you tweak it. And I remember some of my another book I did after this, heavy use of ink, because I wanted to get used to it. I watched another video that said because of digital art, artists get scared of using black. They get scared of using too much because you can have all these layers of shading and all this color, and then you're dyeing the lines and whatever else, right? In classic comics, it's just so much ink.
Yeah.
And I was reading it, and it said if you want to get into comics, overuse your blacks when you're practicing. At least I didn't, but when practicing, then when you're used to not being scared of using all that ink, then you can dial it back a bit, and you really learn when to use those stark shadows or when to hatch a certain way or whatever else. A lot of trial and error, a lot of scary decisions. There are things in here I'm sure I could point out that I was like, oh, why did I do that, right? Or why didn't
please do.
Honestly, I mean, even some of it I'm like, well, actually, this is a great example of me drawing and going, okay, let's just use a lot of black just to see what happens. And I got so obsessed with all this black that there's one page in here that I love. It's my favorite one. I learned that I could make an entire page black. I was like, wait a minute, I can use all that ink. And then things started to stand out more, and I learned that colors actually had a lot more meaning in these pages because of that. And I mean, there's things I probably couldn't even, I'd have to really read it to look and go, yeah, I hated that or whatever, right? But I mean, I made 5 books this year of trial and error, of learning how to get scared. I mean, there's ways you can white out things, like you can get white pens and white it out, but that's not fun. The fun part is screwing it up. It shows a lot more love. It's kind of like when comic artists do it now almost purposefully, but Bone, reading it, you'll see like lines coming out of the panel. You're like, why did they keep that? Because it's alive. It's alive. My favorite example, I'm a big music nut, is Down by the Seaside by Led Zeppelin. There's a part in that song. It's such a pretty song. It's so slow and you're chilling, and Jimmy Page screws up a note. And it's so obvious because it's such a chill song. But if he didn't keep that in, I don't think it'd have the love that it does, right? So, anyways.
Hey Jude.
Yes.
Right when he starts to right at the end part, he hits a bad note.
Yep.
Paul McCartney on the piano, and you hear him, and you in one of the remasters, you can actually hear the rest of them go, just keep going.
Yeah.
And they kept it in there, and it makes it.
Yep.
On the other hand, there's times where when you notice a mistake, you can never unsee it, and I'm going to ruin. Hopefully, I'm ruining it for everybody.
Yeah.
Original Star Wars.
Okay.
Which part
in particular?
New Hope. They've just blown up the Death Star. The X-wing has landed. Luke's getting out of it, and Princess Leia comes out and shouts Luke, and Mark Hamill shouts Carrie.
Really?
Yep.
That's awesome.
And because of how big a production that scene was, how little money they had, the audio engineer cranks up the background noise.
Okay.
So you hear, if you're in a theater or whatever, you just hear Luke say something and because your brain's going to fill in, you think he says Leia.
Yeah.
Watch your DVD, go home, find that scene, you hear him say Carrie, and you will never unhear it.
Honestly, though,
and now I've ruined it for you, and
it's ruined. But to me, that's so real. Like, and that's why I like doing traditional now, because I can show people, and I am proud of my mistakes, because I'm like, this was a real, especially right now, a real human made this and screwed up.
Yeah.
So that, I think it's beautiful. I love it so much.
And to continue on with Lucas said, no project is ever finished, only abandoned. How do you feel about that with your work?
Interesting. Say it again. Oh, I'm sorry. One more time.
No project is ever finished, only abandoned.
I like that.
Because you can always go back and do more. And he's notorious for doing that. I'm glad they took it away from him. So at some point you have to sit there and go, I'm done with it.
Yeah.
But you're not finished with it. You're moving on.
I think that's real. That's very real. There's another saying I'm sure I'll butcher, but it's something like, your work is never going to be perfect. It's only going to get better. You're never going to have that perfect, complete thing. And honestly, life would be really boring if you could just hit that absolute. You're always going to learn more. Even some artists, I can't think of any off the top of my head, will completely swap styles, because for them, that is growing for them. They'll completely change. I guess Scotty Young is a great example, because he had a really hard time. A lot of his videos, he talks about it, sticking with that love and that he had for cartoony looks. and working with Marvel, you felt like you had to just do the Marvel style, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that I deal with a lot too with my cartoon look. People, I've had a couple jobs where people are like, no, you don't have that conventional look, and I'm like, darn it.
Mm.
Anyways, projects, yeah, if you abandon them, yeah, they're going to be abandoned. You can continue with them, you can learn from them, you can build them further. Like even Wendy and the Sprite, I could just, like I said, retcon those first three, or I can find a creative way to incorporate my new style and writing style where people can still enjoy those first three, but even new readers can just jump in again, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something about remembering where you came from and just remembering that you're always going to be different with every project. And I don't know, it's the same with inking, right? This book, I love this book, but this new Wendy and the Sprite book to me is like a quadrillion times better than this.
Mm-hmm.
But I could just never print it again and just leave it in the dust. That's just stupid. People love it, right?
Yeah.
And I can learn from it. So.
Well, and as we were talking about, watching in the old Weka comics, which is really great, being able to see somebody's art style grow over time,
Mm-hmm.
and not in a negative way. It's like, oh, well, this is horrible, and they move to good.
Mm-hmm.
It's watching the change and progression of an artist as they grow as a person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
I do have another example for that.
please,
I always screw up his name because as much as I love manga, I just can't remember names. I'm bad with names. The artist and writer, or the original artist and writer for Berserk. Gorgeous, gorgeous art. It is unbelievable. He's one of my main influences for inking. I'll never try to do that because I like cartoons, but he was the main guy I actually studied when I started inking. Was because his ink work is unbelievable. But reading, if you can get through it, because it's brutal. The first book before he passed away, his art, it's like unbelievable how much better he got and how it changed, and even his perspective and the way he drew muscles and the dynamic posing. His work was great, but it's so different compared to where it was before he passed away.
Yeah.
And I remember reading interviews that they actually had to. It was kind of like with Lucas, where they had to take away his toy.
Yeah.
Because when digital drawing came in, and he was like, because he was obsessed with detail. He's like, I can zoom in, and they're like, oh no, because now he's just gonna. It took him forever because he just zoomed and zoomed to get these details. Huge perfectionist in inking. You're sorry.
No. You keep going. There was an artist. He did Hard Boiled and Rusty the Boy Robot.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just completely blocked my mic, so I don't know if any. Hard Boiled and Rusty the Boy Robot, 90s.
Yep. Okay.
So intricately detailed, but
Mhm.
it took him 3-4 months to get something out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, and he did, both those comics were from Dark Horse at the time.
Cool. Okay. Cool.
And they were, none of them were in color. I don't like. I think if you were to attempt to put color to it, it would destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
But just excruciating detail.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, so Rusty the Boy Robot it was a take on Astro Boy,
Okay,
essentially, but different and quite interesting. So it's this sort of technocratic city, but there's steam pipes going. Like, it's not steampunk, but there's pipes and conduits going everywhere, and everything has detail, and there's rivets, and for like and it's insane, So I can understand how you're going to fall down that rabbit hole.
It becomes an obsession. And like I said, Lucas and them are maybe bad examples of that, but it's interesting to see. Like, there's a writer a couple writers that I know that they never make their book because they're so like, it's got to be perfect, or now this has changed, or blah, 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 blah. And I find comics, especially, you can be perfect, try to be perfect. You can curate as much as you like, but until you make that book, you're not going to go anywhere. And I would even say rewriting or redrawing is abandoning. It's completely abandoning what it was and abandoning your opportunity to grow, which is this is a sequential medium, and so is your growth. It is sequential. You are going to be better than the last panel. You're going to be better than your last whatever you did. And that's just the name of the game, and you should be proud of where you were. So it's a huge topic that I love to talk about. because I would love to redraw my other Wendy and the Sprites, and maybe even an Overflow 1. I'm going to make sure I don't, because why would I?
Could you or would you be open to potentially telling it from a different point of view? Because then you're not overwriting the original, but there's multiple characters in there, writing it from a different point of view. So that way you can kind of, maybe I was just, or what are your thoughts on? Because my thought would be maybe you get the chance to scratch that itch to go back over it. But as you said, not abandoning.
Completely abandoning what it was to make something different, in my opinion, is a waste of time. Unless it's just a fun thought experiment, honestly, is to redraw, right? We see remasters and whatever all the time, whether they're necessary or not. To sort of not abandon the question, but to change it, I learned this year, big time, how collaborative comics are. Because this I colored myself. A lot of work. And I do a lot of funky colors. Like even this is just funky compared to the cover, or there's another page in here that's funky that I'll show. I like to do weird coloring, whether it's good or not. But this one right here, this page, very funky. Anyways, so it was a lot of work, and I like inking. I love art, like just the art of it, not necessarily the coloring. And I've had the opportunity to write less, so I've had a lot more opportunity to pencil and ink. Wendy and the Sprite, I plan to make 4 books next year of it. And I'm like, they're all 22, 24 pages. It's a lot of work for me to then color. Peyton Atkinson is a phenomenal colorist. Leagues ahead of me, which is fine. And she loves the books. So it hit a point where maybe I won't do a different perspective of this story, but I'm willing to let go of things. I've learned to let go of some stuff. I've let go that my old Wendy's could look better. I've let go that, I did this digitally, but people still love it. And I've let go of the fact that, I really want it to look a certain way, but to effectively ink and put in that time that I want to do for Wendy and the Sprite, I want Peyton to color it. Especially because her colors are gorgeous and it will really shine in that story. So I have learned a lot of letting go for some of this stuff. Kind of like Scotty Young letting other people draw Fairyland. Brett Bean did the 2nd volume and Derek Loftman's doing the 3rd, whereas he can just write. There's a point where you're now evolving to a point where you're willing to let others jump in, right? The reason I brought that up was because Wendy and the Sprite, at one point, I want to do a couple spin-offs. Peyton, this is classified. Peyton really wants to draw some of them. So I said, why don't you do it then? I'll write it and you do the art. There's that other perspective where I'm like, hey, I could do another perspective of this story. Wouldn't it be cool if, because it's another perspective, it's a whole other artist? That's fun in this industry. It's a fun thing to let go and try.
But how hard was it to initially come to get over the letting it go?
It's so hard. I did 7 months, okay? And I remember the last page, I finished coloring it, and I was like, I never want to color again, ever. And then I'm like, I gotta make another comic book. Oh, and I was excited. But that was when I learned to delegate roles. A lot of people smarter than me have said that they hire people smarter than them. Because if you can do one thing really good and another thing not so good, you can learn to hire people or get people to do something they're really good at. So it took a lot of just unhinge. Okay, it's fine. And even Scott and I do this all the time. He's got a specific vision, and then I draw it, and he's like, "That's not how I was going to do it." But if you're working together, it's like, I wasn't going to do it that way, but wow, it looks really good. Peyton has blown me away where I'm like, I know I wouldn't have done something like that. I don't hate it. I love it. It's just I would not have done it that way. But it's still effective and it's gorgeous. And like I said, collaborative medium, you need to be willing to collaborate. The best part about this art form, in my opinion, is when you can pick up a book and go, I can tell this person inked it. Or, oh, wow, you can tell this colorist colored it and not the inker. Sometimes the artist will do all of it, right? Well, I can tell that someone else colored this because of how they do their reds or whatever.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite parts of comics, is when you can pull out pieces of another human doing something. That is so cool.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I really love about the medium and why I think it's important is that it is such a collaborative medium, particularly that because even the stuff that you did by yourself, you are a product of everyone, your art lessons, working with Peyton, working with Jeff, that's all influenced you into it. But now, as you said, and I think that maybe, forgive me if I'm wrong, there's nothing wrong with being the guy that does it all themselves, but I think um, that leveling up, as you just said, you want to do the inking, you want to do that, so you have to delegate it to somebody else. But that's not a detraction. That's actually an elevation.
Yes, definitely.
And I think that as you grow in the industry, as people grow in the industry, that collaboration just it's greater than the sum of the parts.
It inspires, and I mean, this is an artwork. That's what I like to call these. They're not just comic books. They are pieces of art. Every single thing in there is a piece of art that makes one collective artwork. And you don't have to do all of it, because if you guys can all, it's like a mural. Sometimes murals are all done with different people and vice whatever, right? That's a big part of it. So it's I don't know. It's something that it took me a while to learn, especially when you know exactly what you want to do. But I think it's important for the industry.
Well, that's I think the hard thing is letting go of the ego a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is really hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, I like my colors, but the fact that Peyton can do specific things that I would like to do, and sure, I could take the time to learn it, but I want to tell these stories, and I know that my inking is where I want it. And if I want it to look that way, and Peyton can do it, and I can help Peyton get a name on a book, and she loves the stories, let's do it together, right? Why not, right? There's no harm. It's becoming the product you wanted it to be, if anything, better.
Yeah, very much so. We've sort of hit the end of it, and I think that's actually a really good place to sort of end it. So I really, really want to thank you for coming and doing this.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. For everybody watching and listening, I'm going to put all of your social media and contact in the description, and hopefully they can come see you at the conventions and keep I think on your Instagram you have where you're gonna be and
everything,
doing what.
If you ever, anything about me is on alschcherry.com. ALLSCHERRY, like the fruit. alschcherry.com. I have a whole events page. You'll have everything. I should be updating it. We're recording this in December, so for 2026, I will have it all updated.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much for having me on.
All right. Thank you, my dude.
Awesome.
And let me hit. No. Okay, now I'm going to have to do some editing.